Seemingly out of the blue, and due to events that started in a faraway continent, we've been hit by a health crisis, which has led us into the most serious global recession in almost a century. As our world's plummeted into an economic crisis, one of the realities of life is that despite living in one of the richest countries in the world, in Australia currently many people are struggling financially. And if history repeats itself, and it surely will, the gap between the wealthy and the average Australians only going to get wider. The good news, however, is that the same events that have made many of us feel uncertain about our financial futures are going to produce some of the best opportunities that you're going to be experiencing in your lifetime. It's going to give you an opportunity to realise your own financial independence. The problem is that we're moving into a new financial era, a time of change. And let's be honest, most of us don't like change. We'd rather have a nice, predictable environment for our job security, for our businesses, for our investments. Unfortunately, all of these are subject to the whims of the market and to the economy, and so to some extent they're not predictable. But as I said, some people are going to take advantage of the opportunities that are going to arise. So you may be wondering, well, how? How are they going to do it? Why? And it's probably not for the reason you think. And that's what I'm going to discuss in today's episode of the Michael Yardney podcast, which is going to be a little bit longer than normal, and it's only going to be me, so it's going to be a long monologue. But I've taken the time to put my thoughts together to explain to you why the rich are getting richer, how they're getting richer, and what they're doing differently and how they're thinking differently. So this is not just the rich habits, poor habits discussions you've heard me talk about before. It's much, much deeper. And stick with me, please, because at the end, I'm going to give you 5 things that you can do straight away to start you on the road to more direction, more certainty, better results in your financial future. That's what you hear about, isn't it? That's why people come to the Michael Yardney podcast for more money, more success. And yeah, through property. Today's not a property show, but if you're looking for more direction, if you're looking for more certainty, that's what you're going to get at the end of the show. So welcome to today's episode of the Michael Yardney podcast.
Welcome to the Michael Yardney podcast, where twice each week you will learn a number of new ideas regarding success, property investment and money in around 30 minutes. Our show is brought to you by Metropole, who specialise in helping you grow, protect and pass on your wealth through strategic property and wealth advice. Now here's your host, Michael Yardney, Australia's most trusted property commentator who has once again been voted Australia's leading property investment advisor. That's the 5th time he's won a similar award in the last 7 years.
Many years ago, I read the classic book by Napoleon Hill called Think and Grow Rich. I'm sure you've heard about it. It was written almost 100 years ago, but you're going to find it on the bookshelf of almost every successful investor, business person and entrepreneur. Now, there's a good reason why they call this book Think and Grow Rich and not Get a Job and Work Hard and Grow Rich. And it's because the rich think differently to most people, and they think differently to those who work hard at a job and don't end up getting rich. So in this podcast, I'd like to talk to you about the way the rich think compared to the way the average person thinks about money and about success. Now, remember when I use the words rich and poor, I'm not meaning any offence. I'm just giving you a contrast in the way different people think. And in Australia and in the countries where a lot of people are listening to this podcast, the poor are still richer than many of the rich people in other countries. So I'm not making a value judgment. And I'm not suggesting that in Australia in particular, poor are really, really poor. I'm just going to be using those expressions to help contrast the very two different ways of thinking. So please don't take offence and pay attention to these lessons, because if you ask me what's the big difference between the rich and the poor, the rich and the average Australian, and it's not just that they've got more money, it's the way they think. So at the end of today's session, I'm going to give you some specific things you can do to get further up the financial freedom ladder, to get through the challenging times we're currently experiencing, and to come out the other side with some certainty and some clarity. So let's look at some of the differences between the wealth-generating thoughts that the rich have, the wealthy have. And again, rich and wealthy aren't exactly the same thing. To be truly wealthy, you need much, much more than money. You need your health, you need people to love you and somebody to love, and you need time to appreciate it. You need to be able to grow your personality and your knowledge, and you need to be able to give back to the community. But let me just talk about money in this session. Have I got your permission to do that? So let's look at the difference between wealth-generating thoughts and impoverished ones. And the first one I'd like to share with you is that rich people think big picture, while the poor, or the average person, tends to get lost in detail. You see, the rich have got a big picture outlook in life in general and in the investments in particular, while the poor think in a more detailed way. The rich have a longer time perspective as well. So in the challenging times we're currently going through, they know that we're going to get through them, and they know that there's a good future waiting for them. I frequently see the rich do well because they recognise opportunities, while the average Australian gets bogged down and gets distracted by the finer points. This often means they end up seeing obstacles, seeing problems, rather than seeing the big picture. Now, a good example of this is, I remember a number of years ago, look, it must be about a decade or now ago, when the Victorian government was looking at changing the land tax rules. And I remember Sam, a doctor, came up to me and he asked me what I thought about him selling one or two of his investment properties. He was concerned about the proposed land tax changes. He was worried he was going to have to pay more land tax. Now, the fact that he's a detailed person was clearly a great benefit for him professionally. I'd be more than happy to have him as my doctor, because I know he wouldn't miss a diagnosis. But as a property investor, this same level of detail was actually hindering his progress. So I remember that was the time when I used to sit down with clients. I don't see many clients at all anymore, only a few group of high net worth clients, and I see the people involved in my mentorship program. But when I sat down with him at the time, we analysed his, at that stage, it was a very substantial property portfolio, and he worked out he'd have to pay probably about another $20,000 a year in land tax because of the proposed changes. They hadn't come in yet, and he spent hours trying to work out the ramifications, and he was uncertain what was going to happen. So, in fact, he had initially decided to sell a couple of his properties. But when I sat down with him and explained the big picture, he still had difficulty accepting what I was saying. So I asked him to, again, look at the value of his property portfolio. And as I said, it was very significant at the time. This was, as I said, over a decade or so ago now. But I still remember it. It was worth about $3 million. And I asked him what he thought would happen to his property portfolio in the next 7 to 10 years. And he said, he wasn't sure. And I reminded him that well-located capital city properties in our major capital cities had doubled every 10 years or so in Australia. But he owned investment-grade properties. And in general, when we look back, his property portfolio had increased in value by about 8 to 10% every year. He owned properties in good locations, high-growth locations, but he somehow still had doubts about the future of his properties. There was uncertainty. There was uncertainty about taxes, uncertainty about interest rates, uncertainty about the future. Now, I know there's probably some people thinking this at the moment too, but anyway, after sitting with Sam and we spoke further, he eventually accepted that even if the value of his properties didn't double in 10 years or so, they'd almost certainly double in 15 years. So I went on to explain that if over the next 15 years he was paying on average another $20,000 a year in land tax, that's a lot of money at that time, this would mean he'd have to pay maybe an extra $250,000 in land tax over that 15 years. Now, sure, that's a lot of money, but the value of his property portfolio would have doubled, meaning it would have probably increased by $3 million in the same time frame. And he was initially prepared to let go a portion of that $3 million of tax-free capital growth and the rental income that would come from that, just so he wouldn't have to pay an extra $20,000 a year land tax. He was getting lost in detail, and as a result, had difficulty seeing the big picture. For Sam, the devil was in the detail, as they say. Anyway, in the end, Sam hung on to his properties, and in fact, I remember he actually bought another one. Interestingly, when the proposed land tax changes came in and were announced, they were watered down considerably, and his worry proved completely unfounded and unnecessary. And I saw this a couple of years ago at the time that there was concerns about capital gains tax being changed, negative gearing being changed, and people lost touch with the big picture, and clearly we're seeing the same in 2020 with the current economic climate, when it's hard not to get stuck in detail with all the news happening the whole time. But remember, the wealthy people don't get stuck in the detail. They have a long-term perspective and they see the big picture. Now, we're going through the different ways of thinking, the reason the rich are richer because they think differently. And another thing is that they think differently about time and money. The poor trade their time for money while the rich work their money. As I said, the poor trade time for money. The only way they know how to get more money is by working harder, by trading hours for dollars. Either they work more or they get a second job. I know a number of people, in fact, who've got 2 or 3 jobs. And that's not just to become wealthy. That's just to keep surviving. The rich don't get a second job. They send their money out to get another job to work for them. They invest in assets like property that increase in value, that bring income in, whether the owner works or not. It's in fact their tenants that do the hard work. They get up every morning, they get dressed, they go to work, they get paid, they pay tax, they pay the rent to these rich property investors. As I said, while the average Australian works for their money, the rich have got their money working for them. You'll never become rich if you work for money. You'll never become rich if your money isn't working for you when you're asleep. Another difference between the way the rich and average Australian thinks is the poor people think cash flow is important and the rich think assets. Now, I know why they do, because they're short of money, but it doesn't work that way. It sort of follows on from the previous point. The poor build their cash flow while the rich build their asset base, like an investment property portfolio, and the poor spend their cash flow, the money they've earned, but after paying tax, while the rich spend their capital or money that's been generated by their assets that sometimes they don't have to pay tax on. Can you see that? It's actually a really different way of thinking. So let's look into this a little bit more carefully. The average Australian only knows how to increase their income by working more hours or getting paid more for each hour. Now, that's currently really hard to achieve in this environment, isn't it? So the only way they think of their income is as cash flow, as money coming in. On the other hand, the rich understand that capital growth, the increased equity of their assets, such as property investments, is really another form of income. Now, sure, you can't eat capital growth and you can't really spend it unless you borrow against your increasing equity. But over time, as the value of your property increases, your rental income increases too. So does your cash flow. And while the wealthy know that cash flow is important, it's important to keep them in the game, it's really capital growth that's going to get you out of the rat race. They know they can borrow against this increase in equity. They can use the funds just as they would use money they've earned in other ways to get the deposit for their next property. But because the poor and the middle class think cash flow, if they choose to go into business or invest, they try and look for income, for cash flow, while the rich build their asset base. They get equity in their properties. They get investments in their business. So that's why most property investors never succeed, because they're investing for cash flow rather than capital growth, while the poor are busy working hard and building their cash flow. Because that's the old rules. That's what was told to them. The rich are quietly building up their asset base. The poor tend to build their cash flow. They think cash flow. They trade their time for money, for cash flow, and they spend their cash flow. They spend their dollars, but it's only after they've paid tax on them. Rather than spending their cash flow, the rich, where they can spend capital, they borrow against the increasing value of their properties. And interestingly, you don't have to pay tax on that money. Even though the increasing equity is a form of passive income, it's not seen as income by the tax department. So you don't get taxed on your increasing value of your properties. Well, not unless you sell them. So the rich use this equity, as I've said a couple of times, to borrow against it, to give them cash to buy another property, or sometimes even to live off. Now, sure, they've got to be able to service the extra debt, but it's a different way of thinking. Another different way of thinking is that the poor try to save their money. They think it's the way to become wealthy. Unfortunately, that's not the way things work. You just can't save your way to wealth, especially with tax and the rising cost of living eating away at your savings. And as we come out of this economic crisis, we may enter into an inflationary period. Look, I don't know, there's too many unknowns, but one way we may end up repaying all this government debt is by having inflation so that it becomes less valuable, the debt. If that's the case, if you're a saver, you're going to lose money more quickly. And even if we don't get inflation at the very, very low interest rates at the moment, what can you save? How can you get forward? On the other hand, the rich are comfortable borrowing, especially at these low interest rates, and they use leverage and gearing to buy appreciating assets. They recognise that they're going to become wealthy by owning a significant property portfolio, and they can only achieve this by borrowing. They know you can't save your way to wealth. So as I'm walking you through the way the rich people are thinking differently to the average Australian, I just want you to think, hey, how does that relate to me? Now, you're already in the group of successful people who are trying to improve your wealth. That's what you're doing listening to my podcast. So I'm not saying all of this relates to you, but please keep listening to this, because after I share with you some more ways the rich think differently to the average Australian, I'm going to give you some specific guidance and steps of what you can do to work your way through these financial challenges that Australia and the world is having, and how you can take advantage of opportunities by thinking like the rich, by turning up your financial thermostat, and getting a different mindset. So as we work through this, the poor decrease their debt. They don't like debt, while the rich increase their debt. Can you see that it's actually a lack of financial fluency, financial understanding that separates the average Australian from the wealthy? Because the average Australian's scared of debt. They've been taught to think this way since they were children. Their parents taught them to get a good education, get a good job, buy a home, and then slowly pay for your mortgage on your home. On the other hand, the rich realise that they become even more wealthy by owning assets that increase in value, and businesses, shares, now they haven't done too well recently, and well-located investment properties. They recognise that by borrowing to grow their asset base and building their capital, not their cash flow, they're growing their wealth. They say this is good debt and borrow as much as they can safely and securely to own the largest property investment portfolio they can comfortably service. Along the same lines, another way the poor do things differently to the wealthy people is the poor try and pay off their home. As I've explained, the poor have been taught to pay off their home. One of their aims is to reduce their debt, and they see their home loan as bad debt because it's not tax deductible. Now, I disagree. Your home's an appreciating asset. Well, in most locations it is, and over a medium to long term it is. Sure, during the challenging times we're experiencing, the value of properties are going down a bit. But remember, right at the beginning I pointed out that the wealthy people have a big picture outlook and don't get caught up in the short-term details. But anyway, as I say, your home's an appreciating asset, and it's the only way most of us can ever buy a home is by taking on a mortgage. So even if your home loan's not tax deductible, in my mind it's not what I'd call bad debt, it's what I call necessary debt. And the rich recognise this, and they don't strive to pay off their home loans, especially at the current low interest rates. They pay off the minimum they can, they borrow interest only if they can, and instead they use the money that the poor use to pay off their home loan. They use these funds to buy more appreciating assets. They use this money to invest in properties that increase in value and create wealth for them. I hope you can see that there's a big difference between the way the average person thinks and the wealthy people think. And I'm trying to point out to you that this is the reason why the rich keep getting richer. They're programmed to do so. The poor also like to trade. They trade their time for money. They also, when you think about property, other things, they try and buy and sell. I guess in some ways they're still trying to get some cash flow. Yeah, that if they add value to their property or if the property increases in value, they tend to want to sell and get that profit. Whereas the rich understand that they make more money by holding on to their assets and never or rarely selling. I mean, the rich still sell properties. There's lots of reasons to do it, including sometimes it's the wrong property, or as you grow your portfolio, the early properties you bought aren't as suitable for you anymore. But the rich realise that they can refinance against the increasing value of their properties rather than having to sell. They don't need to sell to realise their profit, while you may need to if you've got shares or other assets. The great thing about property is, as I say, you can borrow against its increasing value. And when you sell, you've got to pay capital gains tax because you've crystallised the profit, and you lose money paying an estate agent for the selling costs and stamp duty for buying the next one. And so the bottom line really is the poor trade. They're looking for cash flow. They lose 15% every time they buy and sell and upgrade again, while the rich know they're much better off borrowing against the increasing value of their property portfolio. Another big difference between the poor and the rich is the poor think scarcity while the rich think abundance. You see, it's a huge impediment to wealth attraction, this scarcity mentality of many Australians. They think scarcity. While they don't think this way consciously, many people have a notion about the amount of wealth floating about this world, and they think it's limited. This belief is based, as I say, on this scarcity mentality or this poverty consciousness. Somehow they believe that for every dollar they earn, somebody else loses out. And you've got to scramble over each other, dog eat dog, and compete to get those limited resources. Their gain, in their mind, is somebody else's loss. Subconsciously, this makes them turn down their financial thermostat. It stops people attracting wealth. Look, obviously, if you're a decent human being and you believe that the amount of money in the world, the wealth is limited, then you're going to stop attracting wealth because you don't want to harm others. In fact, for some people, if wealth comes in their way, subconsciously they feel guilty and they start to repel that wealth. Let me give you an example that may bring this home to you. I believe if you took all the money in the world and distributed it evenly, in, 5 years' time or so, it'd be back in the same proportions again. Do you agree with that? You've heard about people who inherit money or win the lottery and they lose it. And this all has to do with their financial thermostat. It's how high your financial thermostat is set, your wealth operating system, that actually determines how rich you're going to become. So if you make the mental shift that money is limitless, it can be invented, it can be generated on demand. In line with the value you provide, that's going to open up all sorts of possibilities to you. This means it's only your beliefs, your imagination, and your creativity that's going to limit you. Think about that. How liberating is that? Now, another important difference is that the average person thinks life happens to them, while the rich believe they control their lives. The rich believe they're the pilots of their lives, they're pilots of their destiny, while the poor feel they're just a passenger being taken along for a ride in this flight of life. The rich recognise that what they have today and where they are today and what they are today is the result of all the decisions they've made, all the things they've chosen to do and chosen not to do in the past. On the other hand, the poor think life's just happened to them. They're the passenger on the journey, and all that's happening to them is a result of action of others, not them. Those who are stuck in jobs that they don't like or frustrated by the lack of progress financially, they're walking around saying, oh, look, I would be rich, but I'm not because. I don't know, because my parents didn't teach me, because the banks won't give me the money, because my boss doesn't pay me enough, because the government takes too much, because the system isn't working. The problem is these people are so busy searching for excuses for their failure, they can't see the opportunities all around them. So to become rich, you are going to need to become the cause of your life, not the because. Taking personal responsibility for your life puts you back in the driver's seat. If you believe you're in control of your life and your own destiny, you can make prudent investment decisions. As a consequence of this different mindset, the poor tend to speculate while the rich invest. The rich look for tried and tested investment strategies. They don't look for excitement in their investments. They seek excitement in other areas of their lives. They're comfortable with the same old boring techniques such as buying high growth properties in well-located areas and just let their property investments grow. You've often heard me say that my system for growing wealth is too boring for some intelligent people, but it works. And I genuinely, when I learned this concept that I am the pilot of my life and I'm in control and everything happens for a reason, even if I'm not right, I actually act and invest and run my business better because I believe that. So remember, your thoughts lead to your feelings lead to your actions lead to your results. So your outside world is a reflection of the inside world. So it's really, really important to believe you're the cause of all the effect that you've achieved in life. There's a couple of themes going through this discussion, and it's a longer session today, but I hope you can see the importance of this. So we're not even talking about property in this particular session, but if you're coming to my podcast, you're clearly wanting to get more out of life, financial freedom, choices, certainty, direction. That's what I'm giving you in this session. I know it's a bit longer, but please bear with me because I've got some great direction for you as we move forward. Another thing is that the poor think small while the rich think big. When I speak with beginning investors and ask them what they want to achieve, many are just happy looking for, one or two properties. Well, I don't see beginning investors anymore. I used to when I first started consulting with clients well over 20 years ago. Now I have others in my team who do it. Really, I only look after a really small group, I think 4 or so high net worth clients at the moment, and also with the people who are part of my mentorship program. I have fun having my power chats with them. However, those people, as I said, the average person only wants 1 or 2 properties, but those who become what I call level 4 investors with a real property investment business, they won't settle just for a little property portfolio. They want a multi-million-dollar property portfolio. They think big. They take responsibility. They play the game to win, and they do well. When you think like a rich person, you can have big visions and dreams. You focus on what you love and the things you're most passionate about. And you believe you can always invent or generate money by creating new businesses, products or services, creating value for others. Fundamental to this mindset is, as I said, the rich take responsibility for their actions, while the poor, they just justify, they blame. Nothing's ever their fault. Couple more different ways that the rich and the poor think that I'd like to share with you. The poor want to be rich. The rich are committed to being rich. There's a big, big difference. One of the characteristics of the rich, according to Napoleon Hill in that book I mentioned right at the beginning, Think and Grow Rich, is that successful people have a burning desire. They're committed to what they want to do, while the average person, they just desire the end result. So now's time to ask yourself, are you really committed to developing financial independence? Are you really committed to building a substantial property investment business? Be honest with yourself. Are you truly committed to taking the path to financial freedom? Or do you just want the money? The money that comes at the end. Because unless you're truly committed, all the obstacles along the way are going to stop you. It's not easy. It's hard. It could be simple because you've got to follow the formula, but it's not easy because obstacles are going to come in the way. But when you move from the realm of desire or wanting to the realm of commitment, ambition, then you've got no choice. It's not negotiable. You're going to get there. Part of the reason the poor aren't as committed is they're scared of failure. They see it as bad. It prevents them from taking chances. It often stops them from investing their money. They think of all the things that could go wrong. And then they worry about what others would say if they fail. On the other hand, the rich know that on their way to financial independence, there's going to be things that don't go according to plan. Some could call them failures. I call them retracements. Boy, have I had my share of failures. I'm a real success at failure. It doesn't matter. I've just found out something else that doesn't work. Doesn't mean I failed. Doesn't mean I am a failure. It simply means I found another method, another approach that doesn't work, and I've got myself one step closer to what's going to work next time. So the rich aren't scared to take a chance. They know they're going to make it. Remember, they're committed. The rich play the game to win, while the poor tend to either sit on the sidelines in fear or they play the game not to lose. They play defensively, and you can't win that way either. The poor think they know everything too. They've been to school, they've read the books, they've seen it on the internet. They don't need to be taught, while the wealthy recognize they can always learn more. They're constantly asking questions. They're constantly seeking answers. They invest in their education. They buy books. They attend seminars. They pay for mentors and coaches. They recognize the clarity of thought that comes if you've got a good support network, a mastermind group, if they've got mentors. On the other hand, the poor often think, oh, look, I know it all. Nobody has to tell me how to do things. So thank you for persisting as I've explained the difference between the way the rich and the poor think, because I started all this off by saying, well, what's the big difference between the rich and the poor? And it's a lot more than just money. The rich are programmed to becoming rich because of the way they think. So what now for you? As you can see, you're going to need to develop a different mindset if you want to become rich. So I'd like you to maybe listen to this again, spend some time considering the characteristics, the quality of a rich person's attitude towards life, towards money, to all sorts of things. What do you think the inner dialogue consists of? Then ask yourself, what empowering, wealth-creating thoughts do you already recognize in yourself? And what are some areas you may need to work on? One of the most important things, first of all, is to recognize that you can change. So how do you move forward? How do you start to evolve your mindset? Well, you need to take the following 3 steps. Number 1, develop awareness. That's what I was trying to do in this session, to help you understand that there are different ways of doing things and thinking. So the first step is to evaluate and come to terms with your current position. And be honest with yourself. How are you doing financially? Remember, you are where you are today as a result of all the things you've done and all the things you've chosen not to do up to this point. Your current level of wealth is a result of all your past thoughts, which led you to certain actions or inactions, those things you chose not to do. Become aware of what's working for you, your thoughts, your actions, your behaviours. Think about the things you want to keep and those thoughts and actions that maybe haven't served you as well in the past. Those aspects of your internal dialogue you want to get rid of. You've probably heard me say before that we're all driving around with one foot on the accelerator and one on the brake. We're all having positive, rich habits and, disempowering, poor habits. So have a think about it. Which of your beliefs aren't working for you? What lessons about money and wealth were handed down to you many years ago that have become outdated in terms of your current needs, in terms of your financial goals? This step requires you to be brutally honest with yourself and really take some time out to reflect on your beliefs. The productive ones and the inhibiting ones. Actually, it's very, very hard to do, and it's one of the things I do in my mentorship program with my mentorees, because you actually need an outsider to see your blind spots. But without being aware of these beliefs, you won't be able to make the necessary adjustments. So step 1 is awareness. Step 2 is develop new beliefs. Once you're aware of what you should retain and what may require some tweaking, you then need to adopt a new belief system of success. Why not model yourself on successful people? People who've already achieved what you want to achieve. If you're wanting to lose weight, then you need to adopt the actions and behaviours of somebody who's lost weight. But there are also people who actually kept that weight off in the long term. So you've got to learn to think like a slim person thinks and eat like a slim person eats. In other words, the fastest way for you to become financially successful is to adopt the thoughts, the behaviours, the actions of people who are already there. What do those people do differently? It's not just recognising the steps they take, it's acknowledging what they believe and how they think about money and wealth. And that's why it's so important to have mentors. That's why it's so important to be part of a mastermind group of other like-minded people. But your mentors, be really careful who you choose, because there's a lot of people out there saying that they're mentors who are out there to try and sell you something. So in my recommendation to you to what to do next, step 1 was become aware of your thoughts. Step 2 is develop new beliefs, and step 3 now is to take action. It's time to use these positive beliefs. It's time to act on them. The process is sometimes called be, do, have. You've got to become the person you want to be as soon as you start thinking and acting like that person. If you want to become wealthy in your mind first. Be that person. Then behave the way that wealthy person does, and then do what you need to do to become wealthy. So completing these steps, you're going to be able to have what wealthy people have. Wealth is a result of your thoughts. and your beliefs, which lead to your actions. As I said before, your thoughts lead to your feelings lead to your actions lead to your results. It's important to understand that you are fully responsible for your financial results. If things aren't working out the way you want them to, you need to stop taking the easy way out. You need to stop blaming outside factors. Yeah, there's a lot of outside issues happening at the moment. No argue about that. But you need to stop justifying why you're not financially successful yet. Most of what you've got today, you attracted by becoming the person you are. If you want things to change in your life financially, you've got to change first. So how do you do that? Well, partly feed your mind with healthy thoughts. Now that you understand that the rich think differently to the average Australian, as I say, you've got to now reprogram the way you think. You really have got no choice. If you want to become one of the wealthy in Australia, you are. There's no choice. You're going to have to reprogram yourself to success. And this requires a lot more than just speaking some positive affirmations. I know lots of people wake up in the morning and say, oh, I'm good, I'm worthy, I'm going to be rich. And while these positive messages make you feel good about yourself, they release negative energy, they help boost your self-confidence, it's going to take much, much more than that to get where you want to go. Most successful people discipline themselves to maintain a consistently positive inner dialogue. I found that optimistic people get much further in the world, and despite all the negative news we're hearing around us at the moment, you've got to remain positive and optimistic. It requires a lot of practice that involves blocking out that little voice in your head that likes to remind you that you're not worthy or that you can't do it. You must learn to replace that self-sabotaging inner dialogue with a new message that's going to override your previous programming, and it's going to become your new wealth operating system in your subconscious mind. That's easy to say, Michael. How do you do that? Well, the key to reprogramming your way of thinking is to keep feeding your mind with the right information. I said to you earlier on I was going to give you some ways of doing it, and that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to give you 4 ways you can go about reprogramming your mind. Firstly, read about successful people. Get in the habit of either reading or listening to podcasts about successful people, not negative things, books, articles, podcasts about other successful people, about things that they've done so that you can become more like them. Visualize yourself. Imagine yourself that you're already the kind of person who you admire and strive to be. Remember that everyone who's at the top of their field today started at the bottom. What that means is that if others have managed to accomplish it, so can you. Psychologists have demonstrated that selecting a role model is essential for reprogramming your mind. It's going to reprogram it with characteristics and qualities that you want to develop. Look, just like budding sports people grow up admiring their favourite football player, their favourite golfer, their favourite tennis player. If you want to be successful in business or wealth creation, choose a person you admire who's achieved what you hope to achieve. This role model can then act as your barometer for your own actions. So when you're faced with a difficult situation, ask yourself, hey, how would my role model behave in this situation? How would they think? What would they do? What actions might he or she take? You'll find that when you think about how successful people would behave, your thinking improves and you tend to perform better in all aspects of your life. So the first thing to reprogram your mind to keep feeding it with positivity is read about successful people. Number 2 is study your business, your industry, whether it's property investment or your profession or your job. Become an expert in your field. Read everything you can about that business or industry. And again, property investment is part of your industry almost certainly as well. So that as well. The more you learn about your professional trade or chosen field of investment, the more confident you're going to be in your ability to do well in it. The next tip to actually keep that positive mindset in these difficult times is join what I call the podcast university. There are now so many educational programs you can listen to on your smartphone, on your computer, in your car, that you can almost gain the equivalent of a university education just by listening to audio programs on your way to and from work. You can become an expert in wealth creation or anything else you want by listening to audio programs from other experts in your field. Now, some people do it when they exercise. Some people do it at other times. At the moment, it's not as easy to do it traveling and with transport. But of course, you can also watch videos to help fast-track your education. Now, another method that I like to use to keep programming positive thoughts is attending seminars and courses. If you want to become wealthy, you've got to learn from other experts in wealth creation. Attend their seminars, read their books, watch their videos. Clearly, you're not going to be attending seminars for a while now. It's not possible. However, well, not face-to-face ones, but you can see them online. They're sometimes called webinars, sometimes called masterclasses, but be careful whose seminars, whose masterclasses, whose webinars you listen to, you attend. Most people in this field aren't really achievers. They're theorists. They've never been through times like this before. So make sure they're not there just to sell you a product or service. Another way to keep that positive mindset going and get you to the next level is keep the right company. 90% or more of your success in life is going to be determined by your reference group. The people you associate with, the people you work with, the people you live with, the people you socialize with. Look, if you think about it, you tend to adopt a variation of the attitudes, opinions, manner of speaking, fashion sense, ambitions and worldviews of your reference group. The people you spend the most time with. You can make a dramatic change in the way you think and what you achieve by associating with different people, specifically with positive people, with successful people. So decide today that you're going to spend more time with others who are ambitious, who are determined, who are definitely going somewhere in their lives. At the same time, remove yourself from negative people, and in particular, negative co-workers. If you associate with naysayers, you're going to find a lot of your discussion and time spent at work revolves around how dreadful things are, how it's all somebody else's fault, more likely the boss or society in general. So, thank you for spending this time and allowing me to share these thoughts with you, which is in a rather long monologue. But I have got one more recommendation for you. So please bear with me, because this is the brunt of my recommendation where I can help you. You see, if building a multi-million-dollar property portfolio that supports your lifestyle was easy, everyone would do it. I know you get the same emails in your inbox that I do. You can buy 10 properties in 10 years and 7 properties in 7 minutes. No, you can't. The reality is it's not easy to get to the stage where your properties are going to work for you, and it's even harder in the current market. And I hope you realise by now, nothing is going to change unless you change. But the flip side is that if you do change, then your future could be abundant. You could really develop that financial freedom you're looking for. Now, how do I know this? Well, for over 15 years now, I've worked with thousands of investors as part of my mentorship program. Some of them have been more successful than others. In fact, it's got to the point where I can tell in a few minutes when I'm speaking with somebody whether they've got what it's going to take to invest successfully, to be successful in their profession, to be successful in their life, or whether they're going to be like that 90% of property investors who never get past 1 or 2 properties. But it doesn't have to be this way. You see, I know what it takes not only to succeed, but to really succeed in property investment. And that's not because I've just written the textbook on it or because I've worked with thousands of investors, but also because I've built my own very substantial property portfolio and I've grown it, well, now over, I guess there's probably 8 property cycles. And I'm ready to share my insider secrets of success with you. And by the way, it's got to do a lot more than just real estate strategies. And I've put them together in my mentorship program that's going to teach you the 35 traits of all super successful property investors. And you'll find out if you're missing any of these. Because if you are, you're not going to experience all the success you desire. I'm going to share with you the mindset all successful property investors, business people and entrepreneurs have in common. Hey, there's some great news. It's surprisingly simple for anyone to learn this way. I'm going to share with you in my mentorship program how you can use the knowledge that you've got to find your passion, to pursue it, and allow you to become wealthy doing what you enjoy. In my mentorship program, I'll explain to you the main reason why most property investors don't achieve financial freedom, because once you understand this, you're going to be well on your way to property mastery. And I'm going to show you how to turn up your financial thermostat and see opportunities others can't. Now, being part of my mentorship program could give you the choices in life that you're looking for, the financial freedom that you're looking for, that your family deserves. Not being part of it, I guess, literally could cost you millions if you remain stuck where you are. It's a proven fact that the most effective way to succeed at anything is to model, is to copy other successful people. Find out, as I said, what other successful people have done and follow the steps that they've taken to be successful. Now, this concept works for virtually everything, but it works definitely well for growing your wealth, for growing a property investment portfolio, for achieving financial independence. So go to michaelyardney.com.au. There'll be a link in the show notes. But my mentorship program is a lot more than property. So go to michaelyardney.com.au, find out all about it and reserve your place. It's the only way you're going to get to work with me one-on-one, unless you're a multi-millionaire. Currently, I'm working with 4 clients, private clients at the moment. So you won't have access to me personally unless you're part of my mentorship program. Then you actually do have one-on-one power chats with me, as well as the main program that's delivered digitally. So you can do it from anywhere in the world, and it's a digital program teaching you the 35 traits of successful business people, entrepreneurs and investors. Go to michaelyardney.com.au, learn all about it, and let me mentor you to get through these challenging times and take advantage of the opportunities. Well, I warned you at the beginning that today's session would be a heavier session, a longer session, a more detailed session. But in the environment we are in at the moment, I think it's critical to help as many Australians as possible develop financial freedom. And that's going to come from within. I hope that's the message you got today. And if you got some benefit from it, if you thought it was useful, could you please share it with a couple of other people who you think deserve financial freedom as well? Help me help as many people as possible to develop financial freedom. And if you personally are genuine, if you are committed, like I said in that podcast, why not join my mentorship program? Go to michaelyardney.com.au and let me be your mentor for the next 12 months. Now, if you tell the world about this podcast as opposed to just a friend like I asked you to, and you leave a review on iTunes or Stitcher or Apple Podcasts or Spotify, wherever, and I read it out, I'd like to say thank you by gifting you one of my books, which is what I'm going to do to Roden, who left a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts saying, "Property meets people. Michael's doing a wonderful job of taking the business of property ownership and investment and melding it with the human condition in a meaningful and immensely helpful way. Thanks for your refreshing approach." Well, thank you, Roden. And if you email me, michael@metropole.com.au, I'll be happy to gift you a book as a way of saying thank you. But since you clearly like the Psychology of Success sessions, from what you were saying, I hope you get benefit from today. Now, I'll be back again real soon because I bring out these podcasts twice a week. In the meantime, you can catch up with me on the various social media platforms. Just look out for Michael Yardney, YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. And, of course, I hope you subscribe to my daily property update newsletter. I'll catch up with you real soon. In the meantime, have a great week. Make it a great week.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Michael Yardney podcast, which was brought to you by Metropole, who help their clients grow, protect, and pass on their wealth through strategic property and wealth advice. If you like what you heard and don't already subscribe, you'll find us on iTunes or on your favorite Android app as the Michael Yardney podcast. Watch out for our next show, which comes to you twice a week, and you'll learn some new ideas about property investment, success, and money in around 30 minutes. To get more of Michael's thoughts, go across to www.propertyupdate.com.au and sign up for his daily morning briefing, and you'll hear from not only Michael but a group of leading property success and money experts. And just a reminder that the information you heard in this show today is general educational advice and not specific investment advice, as we don't know your personal circumstances. If you're looking for specific advice, why not ask the team at Metropole to help you?